Hey students, for World Cultures, so this should be a virtual day for you all on this Monday. So everyone should probably be at home, or maybe you're at the school in the cafeteria watching this video here. And it's going to be about India's independence, and we're also going to be talking about Mahatma Gandhi here for the South Asia lesson. So India and its independence. Here we go. My slide will work. There we go. Okay, so if you remember from an earlier lesson, it should have been the day whenever they were taking the 7th grade star writing test, talked about the East India Trading Company, which is going to be the focus here in this slide here, the next few ones, honestly. So 1601, the British business East India Trading Company arrived in India and began setting up trading posts. Great Britain began trading with India in the 1600s or 1660s. At first, the British were only interested in trading goods like ivory, gold, silks, dyes, and spices: cinnamon, saffron, pepper, sugar, and vanilla. So this is just kind of like a recap of what you probably should have seen with that Ingenuity video. A colony. By 1760, Great Britain had gained economic and political control over India. Great Britain officially took control of the entire country when it declared India a colony of the British Empire in 1765. And as you can see here in the photo, we got some British people also mixed in with some Indians as well. Also take note of the dress here and also the dispositions, you know, sort of the way the British are presenting themselves as opposed to the Indians here. And when I say Indians, remember, it's not the Native Americans. I'm literally referring to people that are in India, Indians. And just another photo here again of British with Indians in the background. Again, taking note of how they're presenting themselves here, kind of in contrast with each other. Okay, colonial life. Great Britain took complete authority over the colony and denied Indians any role in the government of their nation. Indians were treated as second-class citizens in their own country. There was inequality under British laws. Okay, so British came in, started making their own colony here in India, and they started treating Indians, you know, the people native to India, as second-class citizens, or as citizens that were below British citizens. Nationalism. So in the 1800s, a feeling of nationalism grew in India. Now, if you don't know what nationalism is, it's a belief that people should be loyal to those with whom they share common history and customs. The first two groups to work for the rights of Indians were the Indian National Congress in 1885 and the Muslim League in 1906. And we talked about that in the Ingenuity lesson, like last week. And here's the first Indian National Congress in 1885. World War I's impact. During World War I, millions of Indians joined with the British Army. The British Parliament promised them that when the war ended, Indians would be able to have more control of their government. Oh, that's nice. And here we see an Indian medic or medic troops during World War I from India, especially helping out and working for the British forces here. Unfortunately, nothing really changed after the war, and some Indian leaders actually argued for taking over the British government by force. Many Indians were upset with the British false promises. Those who protested were arrested and sent to jail for up to 2 years without a trial. Okay, so again, the British were like, hey, yeah, we can give you some of your rights back, Indians. And so the Indians believed them. And then even after the war, World War I, it didn't really change. So it's kind of just like empty promises here. Okay, so you can kind of see why the Indians would be upset with that. Amritsar. In 1919, outside of the temple of Amritsar, British soldiers started shooting a large group of Indians who they claimed were gathering illegally. During this terrible tragedy, over 400 people were killed and 1,200 were injured. It was this awful massacre that spurred Mohandas Gandhi, one of the big figures in India that we're about to talk about, and spurred him into action to fight for India's independence. And here we see the actual visualization, like a artist rendition of the Amritsar Massacre. All right, so Gandhi. Mohandas Gandhi was born in India on October 2nd, 1869. Hey, so if your birthday's on October 2nd, you share it with Gandhi. And he studied law in England. After practicing law in South Africa during apartheid, about that in the Africa unit, he returned to India in 1914 with a determination that people should be treated equally, no matter their race or religion. He was shocked by the way Indians were segregated and oppressed by British authorities. And you can see here, Mohandas Gandhi, remember he studied law, and there's just a photo of him back in 1909 as a lawyer. So after the Amritsar Massacre, Gandhi quit practicing law and he decided to devote his life to fighting for the equality of all Indians. He was enraged at how the British discriminated against Indians. And Gandhi believed it was time for the people of India to stop obeying the unjust, unfair British laws. So nonviolence. Gandhi did not think that forceful resistance was the right path for Indian independence. Instead, he encouraged his followers to practice nonviolent protests against the British in order to bring about social change. Gandhi encouraged Indian followers to disobey unjust British laws in a peaceful manner without using violence. And to my knowledge, I believe that this nonviolence angle here with protests, I believe, was actually inspired Martin Luther King Jr. Further along the line in America. So here we have a little written note by Gandhi. God is truth. The way to truth lies through ahimsa. Ahimsa being a word that means nonviolence, I believe, in the Indian language. Sabarmati, March 13th, 1927. Mahatma Gandhi. Or Mohandas Gandhi. Okay, social change. Gandhi developed what he called a system of civil disobedience and believed that it would make the world recognize the injustice in India and force change without using violence. He believed that acts of goodness produce positive reactions, while violence only produced negative ones. Gandhi led his followers in economic boycotts, hunger strikes, and nonviolent protests to oppose the unfair treatment of Indians. And here is Gandhi on strike with textile workers in 1931. Also take note of the garb here. Just their culture and what they wear. The Salt March. So in 1930, Gandhi led a 240-mile march to the ocean to oppose a British tax on salt. Guards responded by clubbing and beating the peaceful protesters. News of this event spread worldwide, and people around the world began to call for the British to grant Indian independence. Okay, so again, the British, this was talked about in the lesson last week, they were basically taxing pretty much salt, heavily taxing salt that was not British made. Okay, so they were basically forcing Indian citizens to buy British salt, to feed the riches back in Britain. And Gandhi and a whole bunch of these protesters here in 1930 during the Salt March, they were like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to actually literally walk 240 miles, march to the ocean, and make our own salt, from the salt water there in the ocean. And apparently they were beaten because of that. And it was publicized, and a lot of people around the world were starting to ask for Indian independence. And he was Gandhi during the Salt March with his protesters. So even though Gandhi and his followers practiced nonviolence, the British authorities really didn't. The Indian protesters suffered brutal beatings and long prison sentences. Despite the dangers, more and more Indians followed Gandhi's wisdom of nonviolent resistance, the ahimsa, and generated support for nationalism and independence. And here it is. And here's Gandhi with his followers here. Again, they were protesters against the British colonizers, and they practiced the ahimsa, the nonviolent protests. Independence. So after fighting in World War II, so not World War I, but World War II, Britain no longer had enough money or people to keep India under its control. Great Britain finally agreed to give up their colonial claims to India. And then in 1947, August 15th, the Republic of India was established. Today, many Indians credit India's independence to the efforts of Gandhi. Okay, so a lot of people believe that Gandhi was one of the greatest influencers for getting India's independence from Great Britain. And here we have India's Independence Day. Yay. Also of note, take a kind of like a quick little mental note about the building here. Probably not very familiar to us here in the States, with that architecture there in South Asia. So many Indians lovingly call Mohandas Gandhi Mahatma, which means great soul. And here he is in the late 1930s. Okay, so now getting to the actual splitting or the partitioning of India. So even though India had won its independence, things were not peaceful in the country. Hindus and Muslims could not reach a solution as to how to rule an independent India. Eventually, the country was split into India for the Hindus and Pakistan for the Muslims. Okay, so Pakistan for the Muslims over to the West, and then India mainly for the Hindus. Okay, so this was British-controlled India around the time of 1945, and then once India got its independence, it was eventually partitioned. I believe it was actually Britain that did the partitioning right after its independence. Pakistan here to the west, this little part here of what used to be British India, that's mainly for the Muslim population, and then India over here was going to be mainly for the Hindu population. And then you can also see Bangladesh here, which is part of partitioning. So 2 Muslim men carrying an elderly woman to their new home in Pakistan. Okay, so you have to think not every Hindu was living in India at the time, and not every Muslim was living in the area of Pakistan at the time. So a lot of them had to basically move between those two countries in order to actually be with their, religious group, because they probably didn't want to be surrounded by a bunch of people that probably had a different way of looking at the world compared to their own. Okay, so there's a lot of pilgrimages to and from Pakistan and India, depending on whether or not you were Hindu or Muslim, and it honestly was not a very good thing. Okay? In fact, there was a lot of turmoil. So this partitioning of India led to genocide, which means the hundreds of thousands of people were killed in widespread violence. That's what a genocide is. Gandhi was very much disappointed by the partition because he wanted all Indians to live together peacefully in one country. Okay, so even though he was Hindu, he felt that all religious groups should really be welcome in India. So Muslim, Hindu, maybe even Christian, pretty much any religion. That's what Gandhi believed, as in there should have been like religious equality, even though he himself was a practitioner of Hindu. So in 1948, at the age of 78, Mohandas Gandhi was assassinated on his way to a prayer meeting in New Delhi. He was shot 3 times by a high-ranking Brahmin. Remember, we talked about them for our notes lesson, who resented Gandhi's concern for Muslims. Okay, so basically someone who was very high in the Indian caste, a Brahmin, who I'm assuming was Hindu. He did not like Gandhi's religious tolerance for other religions, such as Muslims, and that's actually why he ended up killing him. And this is actually going to be where the memorial where Mohandas Gandhi was assassinated. And they actually built this here, the Indians did, and this is probably a photo that was taken more recently, especially since you can consider the, or take into account the colors here. Okay. So, kind of a long one, but kind of a quick little recap of what we talked about last week with the British colonization of India, and then kind of a little bit deeper look into Mohandas Gandhi, the nonviolent protester against the British colonists in India. Okay, so these next few slides are going to be kind of getting into what you're doing for today's activity, or like little discussion board. We're going to be, there's 4 quotes by Gandhi that were said by Gandhi, they're quoted by Gandhi, and you're going to choose one, and you're going to answer a few prompts about that particular quote that you choose. Okay, you really want to choose one that kind of resonates with you, the one that you really vibe with, just one out of the 4. So the first one here, you must be the change you want to see in the world. Hashtag Mohandas Gandhi. I'm never going to say that. You must not lose faith in humanity. Humanity is an ocean. If a few drops of the ocean are dirty, the ocean does not become dirty. Honest disagreement is often a good sign of progress. And then finally, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. It's probably his most famous quote. You might have heard it. Okay, and that is going to go ahead and conclude our lesson on Gandhi and India's independence. I hope you learned something today, and please do not forget to do the activity, the discussion board in today's folder, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Okay, see you next time. Bye-bye.